We appreciate you taking your time to come out and hear about the city of Peachtree Corners. In terms of the way we can do the meeting, it's really best to hold your questions till the end, because as sure as you ask it, probably in just a couple of minutes, I've done this a lot of times, and I've tried to build the answers to the questions in, so I bet I cover it. But, you know, there's always one or two in each time where I go, that's a good question, and we have to go through it. So hold them to the end. I'll be glad to cover. Stay as late as anybody wants to cover our questions. 4 things we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about why should we become a city? Why is doing nothing not an option? Because when I talk to people about this, what they do is they look at me and go, yeah, I hear you say, but you know, Mike, really there's no problem over here where we are. Why do we have to do anything? Why can't we do nothing? That's a good question. We'll talk about why doing nothing is not an option. And then we'll talk about what is the solution. We believe a limited service city is the solution. And last, once we go through it and we talk about the kind of city it is, the cost of it, then I will say this. Of all the times to pick, to ask you folks, that let's have a city with what's going on in Washington and the debt cap and everybody arguing, what a terrible time to do that. Trust in government has never been lower. So the last thing I want to cover tonight is how can citizens be confident that you can control a city, that it won't come like our federal government or the city of Atlanta or any of those other cities where they have a lot of debt and they get into trouble and have to start raising your taxes. What controls do we have in place? Okay? Fair enough? And any questions anybody wants to ask? First question, why should we become a city? And I will say, after talking to a lot of people about this, it's one phrase, self-determination. And it's basically, look around you. We're surrounded by cities or counties. People in Norcross, Duluth, Berkeley Lake, they're making decisions. The leadership of those cities are making decisions to improve property values and the quality of life of all those citizens. And I'd argue that they're doing a much better job of it than we are. Look at how many of you have not been to downtown Norcross and seen the improvements they've made, or downtown Duluth, or anywhere. Because they're making decisions that are in the best interest of their citizens. So self-determination, and we're going to come back to that a couple times during our talk, but I want you to keep in mind, that's what this is all about. Because we're the biggest landmass area in this whole part of the county. If you look at that map, that's going to be the biggest city in population, landmass in Gwinnett County, 38,000 people. Far bigger than any city around us. Biggest city in the county, as I said. So, but those decisions are being made, decisions about all sorts of things, to do with what's in the best interest of their citizens. What kind of decisions? Well, that segues right into why doing nothing's not an option. Because those decisions that they're making, they may be in those cities' best interest, but they're not in our best interest. And what I'm talking about here is, back in 2009, good folks in Norcross attempted to annex all the way from the split down there where Publix and the Target is, all the way up, including Tech Park, the hotels, clear up to Norcross High School. Look at that huge triangle there. That's very high property tax value, very high value property. And when we talked to them about it, their answer was very straightforward. It's the taxes. I mean, they wanted the taxes. We'll talk about this a couple times tonight, but it used to mean saying the words millage rate, because Gwinnett County, your county taxes are roughly 13 mills, and that's .001 is 1 mil, so just kind of mentally do the math there. But their millage rate is 6.4 mils. Our city's going to be up to 1 mil. That's limited by charter, but we'll talk about that a little more later. And the folks in Tech Park and the folks in the hotel said, we don't want to be in Norcross. It's an expensive city to be in. And we realized there that we had to stop that, because the main reason you don't want someone annexing property so close to you is you lose control of it. You lose zoning control of that property. Everybody just visualize right now going out of your house, looking across the street at your neighbor, at his house, and there he is. He shut down his house, and he's got a body shop going there. 367, 24 hours a day, 365 days, he's running a body shop, jackhammers, whatever. And you go over and say, whoa, 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 you can't do this. I'll call the county commissioner, call the zoning people, and they go, see that sign? I'm in a different city. I'm in a different legal entity. We have different rules. That's kind of an exaggeration, but you get the point. If the land is annexed, the zoning control goes. I mean, your county commissioner would have no influence on that. It would be in another city. And the reason Norcross and Berkeley Lake and Duluth, because they're all attempting right now to annex parts of Peachtree Corners, is because our property values are higher than theirs. Average property values in Peachtree Corners, year-to-date July, roughly $300,000, $350,000 for a home. Norcross, average sales value, same period, $98,000. It's just a fact. So the decisions that are being made by those cities to do what's in the best interest of their citizens, that's not in our best interest. So who should make those decisions? Our county commissioner. That's right. Everything's been fine. Our county commissioner's always taking care of us. The last 4 county commissioners have been for Peachtree Corners, Mike. What are you worried about? The 5th one. You can't guarantee that your county commissioner, that's 1 vote out of 5 out in Lawrenceville. And everybody knows the county is concerned right now with one thing, and that is their budget. And she's a wonderful person, Lynette Howell. But you can't count on her or the county to take care of you. Self-determination. We should make those decisions ourselves. Well, Mike, UPCCA has always taken care of us. Since 1993, UPCCA has been a watchdog group that has been working behind the scenes and sometimes, when necessary, in front of the scenes to take care of Peachtree Corners, this area. I mean, and people that live in this area, we've talked to you about any kind of a zoning thing that's been over here. It's been a problem. UPCCA's been there. The dilemma is, well, hold on a second. How many of you mow your grass twice a year? Is that okay? Right. Okay, you see where the joke's going. Peachtree Parkway, we adopted it a couple of years back, 7 years ago. And UPCCA, private volunteers, raised over $30,000 a year to keep that mowed and maintained, because that's kind of that's the high traffic area between 285 and 400. That's real important, big state highway. The state would mow it twice a year, and it would look terrible. And it's right there where Tech Park is. And Tech Park partnered with us and everybody else, and we raise funds, and we do it. And we burn out volunteers quite regularly. How many of you would like to, in addition to your day jobs, raise $30,000 a year? It's not sustainable. And I can tell you, because I'm the president of UPCCA, we can't compete against a city that's trying to annex our property. I got a phone call this morning at work saying, hey, this so-and-so and so-and-so, and this business guy says that he's being asked by this city to be annexed in there, and they're telling stories about Peachtree Corners. And we all have jobs. Doing nothing is not an option. Because once that property base is gone, once someone else controls that property, it's gone. And the risk of what may be put there, and the other point is, we're a 40-plus-year-old community. Started in 1960. Well, a lot of you folks were telling me you've lived here a lot longer. I'm just dating it from where Peachtree Corners, the name started with what Paul Duke did back in 1968. The gentleman was telling me he's lived here longer than that. Yeah, a lot of people have. And the point is, that name value, Peachtree Corners, it has real value. And I gave you examples a moment ago about the property value difference between Norcross and Peachtree Corners. It's very real. Give you a real-life, recent example of it. But my point is, by not having that to apply to all of our property values, that name value just slowly diminishes over time if you don't use it, if you don't promote it. And there's no one promoting it anymore. Real-life example. How many of you got a chance to go to the Peachtree Corners Festival or heard about it? It was in June of this year. Anybody over here? It was a very, very successful event. It was held over there, where,
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A. You know where Chick-fil-A is on 141? Right in that area, back in there. And it was a first-time festival for the city of Peachtree Corners. If you didn't hear about it, you'll hear about it for next year. But a lot of the folks who they talked to about, first-time festival, they said, well, don't expect many people to come, and don't expect to make any money. You're probably going to lose money. Only a couple thousand people are going to show. Well, by about 3 o'clock that afternoon, over 10,000 people had walked down the street. And they were profitable their first year, quite profitable. Reason, a company called Ford Motor Company from Dearborn, Michigan, not a local dealership, Ford Motor Company. They posted Peachtree Corners Festival on their Southeastern Festival website saying anybody who wants to come to our festival and be a vendor, let us know. Ford saw it and said, ooh, Peachtree Corners, we looked into you. We like your demographics. We like your property values. We want to introduce our new car, the Volt. It's a new electric car. You're perfect. We want to come there and want to buy your top sponsorship. So did a lot of other people. It was well subscribed and well attended because the value of that name still exists. So, why should we become a city? Self-determination. Determining what? Well, people are making decisions for their cities that affect our property values, our quality of life. We should be the ones making those decisions. Doing nothing, it's not really an option. A 40-year-old community that is just getting older. How many of you remember up here at the Outback, steak place? Remember when that was a vibrant, growing, I see you nodding your head? Where is it now? That's the kind of thing that we put the Peachtree Corners Overlay District in place to make sure that the standards that are there in place, that you can't put anything of a lower standard in there just to fill it up. That whatever goes back there has to be of a certain quality. Well, the dilemma is no one's promoting that. No one's promoting the name of Peachtree Corners. No one's maintaining it. And that's the challenge for a community. How do we collectively protect our quality of life and our property values? Because as we said, who should be doing it? Our county commissioner? UPCCA? We should be doing it. So, okay, Mike. We're at the point in the presentation where people are starting looking at your faces and you're going, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Okay, I'll listen to you a little further. Okay, what are you proposing? I hear what you're saying, but what are you selling me? It's called a limited service city. And first, let's talk about a city. A city is a city is a city. State of law, state of Georgia, the law regarding cities, there's only one kind. Okay, a city is a city. So if you go to our charter, and I'd like for you all to go there, PeachtreeCornersYes.com, click on the charter, look at it. And I happen to have read it a number of times. So if you they've got row numbers. Row number 40 through row 44 through row 151 is a list of powers this long. It's every power that any city can have. Because we started with the Georgia Municipal Association. That's the association that represents all the cities in the state of Georgia. That's their recommended charter for any city. That's what you ought to have in it just because you're a city. And it's every power that they have. And then you go right beneath it, and we use legal language to say, excuse me, you can have all these powers, but you can only exercise them for these three services: planning and zoning, code enforcement, solid waste pickup. Those are the only three services that our limited service city really wants. Okay? I want you to think about what I'm saying. Most people think of a city. They think of Dunwoody or Norcross, any of those. They're full service cities. They have police, they have parks, they have paving, they have planning and zoning. They do all those things. All we really want is to protect our property values and our quality of life. So we want legal boundaries. That stops annexation attempts. We want planning and zoning so that we can control what comes into our area and make sure that it's a high quality standard development. That way our property values stay high. Code enforcement. Everybody's heard of the phrase, the broken pane of glass theory. I think that started up in New York City or something like that. But the idea goes like this. If you let even one pane of glass be broken and you don't repair it, and the bad guys see it, they take advantage of it. Next time they tag the dumpster, you have to paint the dumpster and you have to repair the pane of glass. And that's the idea of code enforcement. It's the best, surest way of protecting your property values. Like people who only mow their grass twice a year. This is not one of those, you're going to have people running around, your grass, your house needs to be painted, do it, That's not the idea of code enforcement. It's the idea of, it's the rules that Gwinnett County has right now, we would put in place and we would enforce them because we'd have a dedicated group that would be right here in a smaller, more focused area. But that would be one of our services as well because it protects our property values and our quality of life. Third, trash. You guys are in Gwinnett County. I don't even have to tell you why we picked trash. And Gwinnett County has not done the best job of implementing the law. So the way the law reads to us, and we've had our lawyer look at it, is we would have a lot more flexibility under the law than what Gwinnett County has offered you. They offered you one plan and they said, here it is, and here's the price tag, $28 a month or whatever it is. Basically, we would, Duluth, for example. Cities have flexibility, is the punchline. How does Duluth do their trash? Just look at, talk to some people. You know people who live in cities. Ask them how their cities do trash, okay? Duluth makes you pay, if you have 3 bags, you pay for 3 bags. If you have 1 bag, you pay for 1 bag of trash. We could look at that. Norcross has a deluxe plan. If you're a senior citizen, it's one of those, they'll come up to your house and get it and carry it. We would have that flexibility, and we're looking into that. The requirement is that we would have a solid waste pickup plan and say how we're going to address it. Now, just for comparison purposes, what we did was said the county's plan, once a week pickup, the recycling, the yard waste pickup and that stuff. We did the research, and we asked a hauler, same plan as the counties, because everybody knows what they're paying right now. What would you do for? Oh, big savings, significant savings. So, trash, we would have a lot more flexibility. We'd be able to do a lot of just whatever any other city can do. And if we left it like the county has it, significant savings. Okay, that's good. Savings are always good. So you've heard what I said about the kind of city it is. Okay, how much is it going to cost? Because I'm reading the looks, and the faces are softening up as you guys are going, oh, I had never thought of that. And that's the way most people are when we start talking about this. A couple years ago, I was really the same way. Wait a minute, my cities, I'm an accountant. That's what I do for a living. This happened on my watches in UPCCA, so this is what I'm trying to do. Anyway, what is it going to cost me? The charter says up to $1 million. What does that mean, Mike? 0.001 times your assessed value. Average home value in Peachtree Corners, $350,000. Let's use $300,000. That's $120 a year. It's $10 a month. That's the property tax increase. That doesn't sound like a lot. Well, what about my car? Does it apply to that property? Yes, it does. It's 0.01 times the value of your car. If your car is worth $10,000, it's $10 a year. Okay? If your car is worth $20,000, it's 0.01, so it'd be $20 a year. Franchise fees. Yes, it would affect your franchise fees. Does everybody know what franchise fees are? Go look at your gas, electric, water, and phone bill, and Comcast too, I think, and look at it, and if it says down at the bottom, franchise fees, you already paid them. In most cases, what we've been told by the folks that advise you about these things, is if you're already paying it, it will be redirected to the city from whoever's getting it now. Sometimes it's at a higher rate, like the county rate would be 1% or 0.5%, and then if it's a city, it's a higher rate. It would be 2% or 1.5% or some other rate. So it's hard for me to tell you what yours would be. So go look at your bills, and if you don't see it on there, there will be a franchise fee on there. And I will warn you, the state changes these laws from time to time. So that's going to be something that you have to look at. So that's going to be the cost. And as I said, the savings on trash pretty much offsets for most people. Okay? Yeah, and I see that guy shaking his head right there. And he's going, I don't believe you.
You pointed at me, now let me, you brought up trash. I'm not sure if it's going to be that significant of a saving, because prior to Gwinnett's trash thing, I had an independent hauler, and it was a little cheaper than Gwinnett, but nothing significant. And I'm curious, you said you asked one hauler? Just one?
And you're right. How do I know?
If I was that hauler, I'd have lowballed it just to see if I could get this area in play.
And the answer to the question is, other cities have other savings on trash, and what we will do is do it the way the other cities, the flexibility we have there. But the real issue, and the savings, the hauler gave us his estimate, and it was significantly lower than the county's.
Which hauler it was?
He didn't want us to tell him, and it's one of those things that it's a well-known, you know, you see the name on the,
It's not the one that currently has this district?
I can't do that. I would breach the confidence the guy gave me. But let me get to the point about, because, but the bigger point is the savings on trash is going to be significant. And that's just a fact that we know from a lot of other people. But and significant is a subjective term. But the point is more the case of what safeguards do we have in place to make sure you can control the city? Because the bigger issue is, well, how do you know the city council won't then come in the next day and raise the millage rate and add more services? And the issue there is the safeguards that were put in place. Well, the charter was put together by the community. We took the charter and we gave it to our charter team. The charter team in the person of our state representative, Tom Rice, right here. And our senator at that time was Fran Miller. Our ex-state senator, Dan Weber's right here with us as well. And they both can talk about this. But what they did was they took the charter and they said, we want to be able to provide the community, all of you, confidence that you can control this thing. So we put in place in the charter controls so that if you want to add a service, you have to have a referendum. City council can't go out and say, we want to add police, or we want to add parks, or we want to add a transportation department. We would have to go back to the people, have a referendum to do that. What if we wanted to raise the taxes up to 1 mil? You have to have a referendum of the people, and then go back and have the charter amended by the state legislature. That's very unusual in the state of Georgia. Not amending charters, that happens all the time. Recently, the city of Lawrenceville asked, because they have an old charter, they asked to have a city manager added to theirs. But we have a very modern charter. So, Tom, do you want to talk about what you did in terms of the research, in terms of coming up with the safeguards? Would you like to talk about that for a minute? No.
That's why I knew you hanging. Well, hi. It's good to be with you tonight. I've served this district for 15 years, I think it is. Yeah, it's a long time. And I just want to add a little perspective to this because when these guys came to me, the board of the United Eastern Florida Civic Association said it's time to look into this and we want to know what our options are. And Dan and I started those meetings with them, and then after being retired, and moved towards this implementation of the charter in terms of the legislation that's necessary to do it. But the point is that 2-3 years ago, when we talked about this, we talked about with the United Eastern Florida Civic Association. Do you know how big that is, by the way? I mean, it represents an enormous number of people in this area. Most of the homeowners associations in what's the city of Peachtree Corners are represented in the United Peachtree Corners Civic Association. It's probably one of the largest in the state, would be my guess, in terms of the size of the organization. And it's totally a volunteer civic organization. That's all it does. And they do the things that Mike already said. Point is that they came and they presented this idea to people of those boards at that point in time. And they said, no, we don't think that's a good idea 2 or 3 years ago. Well, things have continued to perk over that period of time. What's changed? Well, what's changed is that over that period of time, there's now the city of Sandy Springs, there's now the city of Dunwoody, there's now the city of Milton, there's now the city of Johns Creek. And they're all cities for a particular reason. And that reason is because they have a strong desire to control their own destiny. Well, can we control our own destiny here? Well, Gwinnett County is a great place. It's not like some of the things you find in county government in either DeKalb County or in Fulton County. But those people did that for a particular reason, because it suited their interest in that particular area, frankly, for lower taxes and better services. And that's basically why they made that decision. Why? Because in North Fulton, there was a special tax district. A lot of that tax money from North Fulton went down to South Fulton as a result of how that was managed through the county government. Is that true of Gwinnett County? No, not yet. And I don't want to put fear of God into you, but look, I'm the person who gets to see the demographics on the census. I know that the area is changing, and I know that at some point in time there's probably going to be a different government in place in Gwinnett County. All that augurs for, in my purposes, for something here that improves the control locally a lot better, particularly if the cost is like an insurance payment, basically. That's the way I think. It's a value proposition. You guys got to sit there and say, is it worth it, to go do this in terms of voting for this city? So it's a value proposition in terms of what you think you're going to have to pay versus what the services that we rendered are. I think it's significant, and we've had people speak at various occasions testify to the fact that it is valuable to have a city named. It is valuable to have a place that people can locate on a map and call the city of Peachtree Corner. It's valuable from the standpoint of homeowners' values. And real estate agents have told us that over and over and over again. Now, when they came to us, I don't want you to think anything about the idea that these guys are power mongers. They're just in it to build themselves a city so they can put statues of people like themselves, in the marketplace down there in Peachtree Corners. I don't think that would satisfy them. But the point is, when they came to us, they said, look, we don't want a city. We don't want a city. So Dan and I sat there, and Dan came up with the idea of something called a planning district. The planning district is a new form of government in the state of Georgia, or would be a new form of government in the state of Georgia. Well, guess what? To change the direction of the legislation or the Georgia law in this state, to add another dimension of government to what's already been worked over centuries of time in terms of formulating something that actually does work in a city situation, is very, very difficult to do. And Dan and I both decided that we would, if they wanted to do it, we would give it a try. But interestingly enough, when we addressed a group like this, and the question came up as to how that planning district would be governed, well, we said that the only way it can be governed is by appointments made by the county commissioners. Appointments made by the county commissioners. Well, at that point in time, the mood shifted dramatically to the point of we want to elect the people who would be having control of these services in our area. And when you do that, you got a city. That's the only vehicle in law that allows us to go ahead and do that. And so that's how we came to the idea of pursuing this. One thing Mike did tell you is that this has been professionally done and professionally assessed, because what we did was to have the Institute for Government at the University of Georgia look at this whole proposal, and there's a written report from the Institute for Government addressing the services, addressing the costs, addressing the demographics of the city, and how it should be effectively organized from that standpoint. And that's where we came to the point of saying, well, how'd you get $1 million? Well, it comes from that assessment done by the Institute for Government at the University of Georgia. It's not something that picked out of the air. And by the way, that $1 million is an up to $1 million. Because we don't really know what the revenues are going to bring from the franchise fees. Some people say the franchise fees have generated a significant amount of money. But the council would have the responsibility of assessing how much of the $1 million that they're actually going to put on the tax bill. And so, look, and then we moved on to, well, wait a second, why shouldn't anybody trust you? And that's what Mike was getting to before. We could come up with this idea that said, and by the way, this is unlike any city that's chartered in the state of Georgia. Any one of them. There's none like this. And that is to say that you got to have a referendum, you've got to expand the powers of the city. And so you get to vote on this. And that, from my standpoint, that's what you ought to be able to do. Somebody, if 10 years from now somebody says the police service in Gwinnett County for the Peachtree Corners area has gotten like it used to be in Dunwoody or Sandy Springs or Johns Creek with Fulton County and DeKalb, based upon response time, based upon attention to that particular area, then somebody might say, well, the only way to solve that is to increase the services and have a police organization. Well, you get to vote on that. All right? You get to vote as to whether or not that's an appropriate thing to do. And I think that's a limitation that, for me, is one that protects you more significantly than any other city in the state at this point in time. And I've checked that out, Mike. I did check that with Legislative Council, and there's no other city that has that provision in their charter. So, again, I say this is a value proposition. You got to look at the cost for you, and Mike made that evaluation of $120 on a $300,000 house. Approximately, that's the 1 mil level. And the trash haul, or whatever it is, even if you saved $50 on your trash for the year, which I think is a low number, it'd still be in extremely good shape in terms of buying an insurance policy on the future value of your land and the community you're going to live in. And so then you got to say, all right, well, is this? This is going to be fairly represented. Are we going to be fairly represented? Well, this calls for a 6-member board and a mayor. And it also calls for 3 districts, which this area would be in one of those districts, and then one kind of over Peachtree Corners, and then one further up off of Beaufort Highway type of thing. And then there's 3 at-large members. So there's an opportunity for anybody in here that wants to be involved in local government to go out and run for office. Get your yard signs up, talk to all your friends, and so on and so forth. And by the way, that job pays an incredibly high salary. We made this salary so high that every one of you in here ought to run for it. What we say it was $9,000 a year. I think it was $8,000 a year is what these guys are going to get for that. Well, I can tell you. I told them I would not want to run for that job because I don't want somebody calling me about the trash pickup on that day, at 12 o'clock at night that my trash wasn't picked up. Because there's no price that I would take for that job to do that type of thing. Because I feel responsible to go out and get it for you, probably. And it's not going to happen. So anyway, that's how this came into being. A little bit of background, a little bit of the protections, a little bit of the value proposition, a little bit of the organization from a governmental standpoint. I think these fellows, in terms of Mike and the board, have been extremely professional in terms of the way they've gone about it. Now, I've had the opportunity because I represent a portion of North Fulton also. I don't represent DeKalb. I represent a portion of North Fulton. I've had up in Johns Creek area. I've had the opportunity to see how that community was formed, and and they've gone full boat. The Johns Creek city budget. Anybody see that in the paper, by the way? You know what it is? $54 million.
Whoa.
But they've got police, fire, everything from Fulton County. Any service that Fulton County had, they basically took it. I think that's probably true. Yes, the new waters. I don't know what. There might have been something they didn't take. But anyway, but we're not doing that. Ours is a city light type of a concept. We think Gwinnett County does a great job, but boy, it does buy an immense amount of protection against what's happened in Fulton County and DeKalb County in terms of your property values and ability to control your own destiny. I live here. I've lived here since 1984. This is a great place to live. I'd like to see it continue to be a great place to live. That's why I support it. That's why I brought the legislation in the House. By the way, all the members of the House delegation and the Senate delegation signed on to that piece of legislation. Full support across the entire committee. In case you're worried about what Gwinnettians are going to think about us pulling out, taking our money with us effectively, not true. Everybody's supportive of this idea. So we're encouraged by that response. We're encouraged by the response we've had in other places. So Mike, I'll leave it to you, and you can take questions or do whatever you want. Dan,
Could I add a few things?
Absolutely. Dan Weber.
I have some information I'd like to share with you. My name's Dan Weber. I was your state senator from 2005, actually until January of this year. Although as a practical matter, I was done in 2010. I was very much involved, very closely involved in the formation of the city of Dunwoody. A lot of the research that went into that, and I'm very familiar with the way the city has operated the last 3 years. And there are some lessons there that bear on the issue of cost that I'd like to share with you so you can have more certainty about the cost. I know that there was a feasibility study done for Dunwoody from the Carl Vinson Institute, which I directed that study, or at least I coordinated it. Same group did a feasibility study for Peachtree Corners. Now, Dunwoody and Peachtree Corners are very similar demographically. Now, we have about 40% of our residents live in rental units and apartments. We're about 46,000 people. You're going to be about 38,000. Property value digest about the same. Peachtree Corners might be a little bit less with the population. The city of Dunwoody today is operating on 2.74 mills. DeKalb County charges 5.94 mills to deliver city services. 3 years ago, we were the same, so now the average homeowner is paying about $450 less in taxes to get city services. And when I say city services, that means police, zoning, paving, those sorts of things. You know, most counties in Georgia don't have a police department and don't have zoning. It was in the early 70s when the state constitution was amended to allow counties to get into the city business. So really, Gwinnett and DeKalb already act much like a city. That's why you have a sheriff, which is traditionally a county service, and police, which is a city service, two law enforcement agencies. But more specifically, the utility franchise fees that will be charged or will be paid to the city will be paid by Georgia Power, Comcast, Bell South, those utilities that use the rights-of-way around your streets. Utilities, the only utility that's required to pay a franchise fee to the county is Comcast. So right now on your Comcast bill, cable bill, if you don't have Comcast, you have a franchise fee that's going to Gwinnett. When you incorporate, that fee will then come to the city. So your franchise fee there will not go up. Georgia Power will be the bulk, will account for the bulk of the money that will come to Peachtree Corners. And what Georgia Power does is they will not charge just Peachtree Corners for that additional money they're paying to Peachtree Corners. They will put it into their rates statewide. You don't know this, but part of your Georgia Power bill right now includes franchise fees to support cities such as Dunwoody, Johns Creek, Milton, etc. None of that franchise fee money goes to any counties. So in that sense, when you incorporate, you actually will get some money that will be paid by taxpayers statewide, or at least users of Georgia Power. In Dunwoody, we raise about $3 million a year or more through franchise fees. That's a real number. About $2 million of that is Georgia Power. If you can raise $2 million, which is that's what I think your feasibility study, $2 million, probably come in higher than that. I think they estimated 2.5 for us, and we're getting about 3 or 3.5. So you can expect a similar number. If you have that number, which you will, you'll have a surplus for planning and code enforcement. There won't be any need for any one mill. The reason we put 1 mill in there is just simply as a safety factor, a cushion, in case they needed to raise money for some reason. I don't want to overpromise that, but I'm highly confident in what I'm telling you.
You have to have it for tax anticipation bonds.
Yes, tax anticipation bond, have that taxing authority. There was a gentleman, you asked about the garbage pickup. Can you actually get a service for less money? Well, in DeKalb County, the county itself operates a landfill and picks up garbage. They pick up garbage, really unlimited in amount, on Monday morning and Thursday morning. On Wednesday morning, they'll pick up all of your recyclables and they'll sort them for you. On Friday morning in DeKalb, they'll pick up all your yard waste and your tree waste. So in DeKalb, we really have a pretty good garbage pickup service. In the city of Dunwoody, we decided to stay with DeKalb. But we investigated the possibility of doing our own garbage pickup. And that's where it's relevant for you. We work closely with Waste Management Inc. to get pricing from them. They made us an offer to pay us $2 or $3 million up front, I think for a 5-year contract, and they were going to charge us about $30 less per year than what the cab was charging. The cab charges $265 a year, which is what, about $15 a month? $14 a month? No. Is that probably good?
22.
I'm not $22 a month. So Waste Management would have charged maybe $20 a month and paid us millions of dollars up front, but the community didn't want to do that, so we didn't go down that road. But that's a concrete example of what might be available to you if you go down that road. So I wanted to share that information with you so you get a better idea of what the cost might be.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks very much. You can see why these guys have been elected before. They're much better than I am. All right. We do have an opposition group, and they have been circulating some questions that they, and you know what, I'm glad to read their questions and answer them to you in case they've been emailed to you and you have questions about it. So the first question, what makes you say you can save a certain amount of dollars a year on garbage? Have you negotiated contracts already? How can you do that as a nonprofit homeowners association? It's the same thing. I can't. We have no standing. We just did a little bit of research, and I think Dan has addressed that issue. You can't. Where did you get the money to do the recent mailed piece? I thought nonprofits were not allowed to take donations for political campaigns. UPCCA is what's called a 501c4. The kind that this gentleman is thinking we are is what's called a 501c3. That's the kind that if you give the money, it's tax deductible. Your dues or any contribution made to UPCCA is not tax deductible. And a 501c4 is a nonprofit educational. And so we are allowed to do that. As a matter of fact, that's why when they founded the thing back in 1993, they founded it that way so they could take positions to defend the community should the needs arise. So give us, and where did the money come from? Folks just like you. You know, it's all donations from the community. Give us examples of how UPCCA has improved our property values and how the city will continue to do this. Well, UPCCA was a driving force throughout the community since 1993 in representing the community to make sure that zoning decisions reflected the will of the community. There are countless examples. One of them might be the Forum over there. The Forum was really locked in a big argument with the neighboring subdivision, Amberfield. Had it not been for UPCCA kind of brokering the peace between them, that wouldn't be there today. The property right across the street, Roberts Properties. You know, the original proposal by the gentleman who owns that property was 200 and something apartments. Over time, we persuaded him, and also the economy went down, but that there was a better use for that property. And so there are countless examples of things. And plus, we raise funds to mow the place and keep it cleaned up, and we just are generally watchdogs. How will the city continue to do those things? It'll do those things that we can't do. It'll form a Peachtree Corners master plan. We have, does everybody know where Sturbridge Square is? Those apartments are the oldest apartments. You know where the Crystal is? Right across from Ventura Bread. That is the oldest apartment complex in all of, actually, Gwinnett County. That's where Paul Duke's workers worked when he built that thing back in 1968. And so it's very old. It has fallen apart and it's gone bankrupt. We've been privately, UPCCA, talking for a number of years to developers about doing something about it, encouraging them to develop it. And the first question developers always say, do you have a master plan? What does your community want there? Well, we can't afford to do that kind of thing. So having a community, having a city government that has the resources to do a master plan that takes Gwinnett County's 2030 long-range land use plan and then comes down to our level would be one example of what you can do, plus code enforcement. There's a lot of those kinds of examples.
I have a question about that master plan. I know that there's some contention around some of the master plan issues along Peachtree Industrial. I know that there were a couple of restaurants that wanted to go in. Adrenaline Fitness wants to expand its parking, and it seems to be inhibiting the business growth. And I'm kind of wondering, and I know that there's a solid group of citizens who are focused on that master plan, both pro and con, and I'm wondering how would that master plan work within this new city? And who would be, who would have input into it, who would, you know, yeah, I know, but
Let's start at the beginning with your issues. Okay. What you're saying is there's someone who wants to do a development along Peachtree Industrial right now, and the county won't let them do it?
Right. I mean, I think that city area, that city of Chamblee is
It's in Chamblee,
Oh,
where the
right.
real fight is, and that's where
Oh.
we'll
And so I'm
move on
kind of-
up the road.
Yeah, and so I'm kind of wondering how would
How does
we
it work in
avoid
Gwinnett
those
County?
kinds of master plan issues where,
You know, typically, when you look at Peachtree, let's start at the 20,000-foot view. Peachtree Corners was fortunate that Paul Duke, when he laid it out back in the day, it's very well planned. That feasibility study that Tom mentioned, those people who did the study said, you are really weighed out. You know, and here I'm working to the point is always the conflict between the O&I, the commercial, the residential, all those sections of zoning. And typically what you get is when one area, when someone wants to put a commercial use in the middle of right in the middle of Lock Ridge Forest, they want to put something where everybody else says, wait a minute, I don't want you to be there. I have property values, and it's a property rights versus property rights issue. I don't know the example of what you're talking about, ma'am, but typically in Gwinnett County, that's all locked out by zoning. In other words, everything is zoned, and they review it every couple of years with what's called the long-range land use plan, and it defines the Gwinnett County master plan. And as a government, the city will be required to have a master plan and a land use plan, and ours has to be consistent with those around us, which would be Gwinnett County and the city. So ours would be done that way. I really can't say that I know about that particular example, and you have to reconcile those issues. And that's the business UPCCA as a volunteer group has been in for years, is making sure that the highest and best use for the neighbors around it. Typically, when UPCCA would get involved in anything, it would be, what does the neighborhood, what are you complaining about? What's the problem? And it was always someone wanted to put something in an area that the homeowners would go, we don't want that there. And so we would
So
come
in
in.
this city, who would design the master plan? Who would have input into it, and who could make changes to it? And how long
The
would
way
that,
that's-
would those changes
The way
take
that's,
to?
typically you start with Gwinnett County's zoning ordinances, then you would have like a planning group, and the city council would commission some folks, and it would be citizens groups, and then these things are typically done by professionals. A master plan that would be consistent with Gwinnett County's, and that would be done with citizen input, and that's the group that would be, and before it became done and the city council would vote to adopt it, everybody would have a chance to look at it and comment on it. So, does that answer your question? I'm not sure I am. So, okay. Okay, fair enough. Okay, let me go back to my list here. Is it true that it only takes a referendum to raise the taxes? No, taxes have to go to the legislature to be raised. Is it true that the council could give itself a pay raise on the first day on the city? And that they always provide a fleet of vehicles to the city council? Well, yes. If you go back to the charter, the right to give yourself a pay increase does exist, and it does mention things about cars and things like that. But when's the last time the legislature gave itself a pay increase? I guess the point I'm trying to make, I think it was the 1980s. That's not likely to be the first order of business on the first day. The fella here is confusing the issue of all those powers that you have versus the services. We're going to have 3 services. Nobody's going to be giving anybody a pay increase. So, yes, sir, you had a question in the back?
Yeah, does that where that 120 plus comes in at? The pay for all the vehicles and extra salaries?
Yeah.
Because the paper I read said 120 plus.
120
That came in the mail. 120 plus, I'm sorry.
Probably the
Dollars.
franchise fees and the other fees.
Yes, ma'am. Hold your thought. The property
Fire
tax
came in the
increase
mail.
would be on like a $300,000 house, 1 mil would be $120 a year. If your house is valued at a higher level, it would be, is that what you're referring to, sir?
Yeah.
Okay. There was a question on the back row. Did you have a question, sir?
The 1 mil.
Up to 1 mil.
Is there a cap on that? I mean,
It is-
does that change?
The charter is capped at 1 mil.
For how long? I mean,
Until the referendum by the people says, we want you to increase it. Let's use a hypothetical example. 10 years from now, as Dan said, we want to have a police department. We would have a referendum. You would all vote. Check. We want a police department. And check. We want you to increase the millage rate to 1.1 mils. And you got to agree to it. And we take it over to our legislators and say, the people have spoken, amend the charter. So it's 2 safeguards. You vote, they have to amend it. Does that answer your question? We can't, the city council couldn't vote to add services or increase taxes.
So it's by the people.
Yes, sir. And as Tom said, that's the only city in the state that provides those safeguards of having the people vote on adding services in the state of Georgia.
Are you
Yes,
familiar with the Gwinnett County SPLST tax?
Squashed. Yes.
How does that come into play with this? Do you need to answer that question?
Well, the county transportation SPOS is what you're talking about, and the county did say that there was a $12 million, in SPOS funds that actually would come to the city. But the fact of the matter is that there's no paving opportunity here in terms of the powers that have been granted to this city under this charter. You have to buy the services, so they buy the services back from Gwinnett County. It's more a county transaction. It would come into the city and go back out to the county to work into their paving plan, whatever that turns out to be.
Okay, so it really has no impact.
It's not, it's a net zero. Should be net zero.
It won't even increase at all. Any other kind of questions?
I have a question on code enforcement.
Yes, sir.
As to what that would cover, code enforcement. I mean, I know the intent is not to worry about whether I cut my grass every week or every other week. Just like, I mean, Dunwoody's intent was probably not to go after chickens and 4 cars in your driveway. But you got some overzealous people that decided that was best for the community, and that's what they went after. So that's, I know Lawrenceville is probably not going to worry about how many cars I park in my driveway and whether my neighbor has a chicken or not. So with this code group, would that fall under their area, and would that comply?
Everybody hear the question? It's a good question.
Yeah.
Because I've talked to people about it. Code enforcement tends to be, and half the people want stronger code enforcement because they don't like what somebody's doing. Half of them are asking a question like, oh, wait a minute. Are you sure it's not going to be somebody going around going, your house, that shade of green, you have to change that. That's not in the, it's not like a homeowners association. If you're thinking of it like a homeowners association bylaws that you have to get there, or an architectural review, you have to get their approval. No, that's not the kind of code enforcement we're talking about. What you start with is Gwinnett County's ordinances right now.
Yeah.
And then if there are changes, they'd be proposed to the city council. So
So they would build on Gwinnett County, sort of
Yes.
what Dunwoody did on DeKalb.
right. That's the starting point.
And,
So,
yeah.
you can make
Code enforcement is much, much broader than property maintenance ordinance that the county has.
Yeah, I understand that.
The grass cutting, I know you do, the others may not. Grass cutting, number of cars, height of fence, and placement of fence, as well as the maintenance, and is all property maintenance type ordinance. There are code officers that deal with that. The city will be in the code enforcement business, which also means building codes, plumbing, safety codes, and ultimately, if so chosen, fire codes and that sort of thing as well. It's a pretty involved thing, and it's not as simple as the homeowners association or an architectural review board looking at something.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Two questions related. First is related to that question. Is you mentioned taking the county code and building from there. So how are new codes instituted in the city? What is that?
It'd be a vote of the city council based on input from the citizens. In other words, it would be someone saying, you know what, and talk to your city council manager. That's why, when people ask me, what are the downsides of the city? My first one is be careful what you wish for. Because now you have what's the best control on the city? Our involvement. We get to vote. We get to pick our representatives, the city council, and the mayor. So the answer is start with the city council, and there'll be a process to develop, new ordinances, change, and it'll be studied and voted on. Does that answer your question?
It does. And the second question is, in the feasibility study, was there a proposed budget for the city, or does something like that exist today? What it would take, to run the city?
No. I will say a feasibility study, what they did was they compared us to cities with a similar population size, and they said, how much would it cost to run those cities? And they were full-service cities, but they only got those 3 services that we are proposing to do. And then it's what kind of revenues from our tax digest from the community that we have, and they compared them, and it was quite positive. In other words, that's why the recommended millage rate is so low, up to 1 mill is, they said that's pretty
And
low.
that was taking into consideration what they expect to get from franchise fees. and so
Oh,
forth.
yes, yes. Yes, sir.
What about business license? Will the city have control over that, or is it still the county?
Still the county. The way I like to explain that is the taxes follow the service. In other words, if we if we're going to administer business licenses, we would get that. But since the county's going to do it, that would go to them. The hotel motel tax, that's something that's it's a really big deal to Gwinnett County, because the Gwinnett Stadium is, that's based on that, so that goes to them.
Where is downtown Peachtree Corners going to be?
When you find it, let me know. It's one of those cities, it's a new city, there's no downtown, and
So
that is,
where's the city council gonna meet?
Where do they have?
really haven't, the city council will find some empty real estate space someplace, I'm sure they will.
Stuart Ritchie Park one.
There you go. You know?
There's a lot of that empty real estate around.
Yeah, that's kind
Yeah,
of one of
it's
those
not gonna be a
things.
problem.
Yeah, I don't think that'll be a problem. Yes, sir, back row.
I'm curious, I want some clarification on services that the city of Light will not provide. GDOT maintains state highways, the county maintains county highways, emergency services for that county. We have fire, we have water, sewage, stormwater, all those things, we're still paying on. Now, I'm assuming that there'll be joint agreements between the city and the counties to provide these services. Are we sure that those services are still going to not have a surcharge on them, or how that's going to be worked out? I'm a little concerned about that.
That's a perfectly legitimate question. You're no more paranoid than me, because I had the same kinds of questions. There's a 2-year period from the date that we become a city that you work out what are called intergovernmental agreements to iron out all that stuff. And no, your rate won't go up. The arrangement we'll have with Gwinnett County is, think of it as the 13 mills in taxes you pay right now, one on top of it. If you lived in Norcross, it would be 13 mills of property taxes to Gwinnett County, 6.4 on top of it. The services that are provided by Gwinnett County, and you listed them all, did everybody hear what he said? It was police and fire and all that stuff. They're still in that 13 mills. So the price of it, the cost of it doesn't change. So that's my understanding of the situation. Do you have a different, you want to add anything?
That's exactly right.
This is okay.
So probably, I'm assuming that you'll probably determine the level of present service, which say the county police will have 2.5 patrolmen on duty for 8-hour shifts, or something like that as a minimum level. And then anything beyond that, then they may have to come back to the city and say, we want to change that. I'm assuming at some point we're going to state the baseline case of the services for the existing amount, and lock it in at that point.
That's a good question. And my understanding is that when you do those kinds of, we've never done this before. This hasn't been done anywhere. But a service level agreement requiring a certain amount of coverage is common in these kinds of situations. So I think my answer to you is yes. That's the way I look at it. Yeah, as Tom said, it's the way it's got to be. How else would you do it? Leave it open for them to do what? Yes, sir.
A couple of times you have made references to someone putting a commercial establishment in Milwaukee as far as those kind of things. You may not have meant to do that, but I think you should clarify that there's protection that already exists in planning and zoning to Gwinnett County.
That's right.
That's not unlikely to happen.
Yeah, I would.
That you're going to be building on top of that. And you may not be able to improve anything that the county's already doing. They also police grass already. You'll mow your grass, they'll come out and tell you mow your grass.
He's exactly right. I mean, it's the difference on code enforcement. Matter of fact, that's a great answer to this gentleman's question. Is Gwinnett County's, we're lucky. Gwinnett County gives pretty good services. And there's nothing wrong with Gwinnett County. The issue is protecting our property values from folks making decisions, and I won't restart this whole presentation, but you heard what I said earlier. But you're absolutely right. Gwinnett County's got good zoning, and they've got good code enforcement. Right now, they got a budget problem, and they're looking at a great big county. And for what we can do here, we will have a group for the price that we've all talked about that can focus on a smaller group and police enforcement. Yes, sir.
You're still going to pay for Gwinnett County's costs of zoning. You're going to do that on the county level. Your taxes, you will pay for that. And what you're doing is you're adding another level of zoning and enforcement on top of that, for some preconceived notion, apparently.
But it only,
what things should be.
but their zoning won't apply to us. It'll be ours because we're a legal entity ourselves. Their zoning rules, that was the argument, that was the discussion a moment ago about if someone annexing property next door to you and they're in a different city, You can't control what they do. The zoning is different in a different entity.
But you're still going to be depending on the county to zone for certain things, or
No,
not?
no.
Okay, fire protection?
No, let me get this.
You going to take care of fire protection on the local level or not?
No, fire protection's done on the countywide basis. I've been involved in every land use thing around here for the last 10 years. When we become a city, our zoning will be handled by our city council in May, period. The county will no longer be involved. I'm also on the zoning board of appeals. I have this area for cases. I'm very, very aware of property maintenance ordinance and all the types of things. I will no longer, if I'm still on the board for Gwinnett, I will no longer have this as a series of cases that will be done by the city council, by the mayor, or if they have some kind of a zoning board of appeals.
Wayne's on the zoning board of appeals for Gwinnett County. He's also in the UPCCR. I didn't tell you what
At any rate, the question is the county going to be handling any of the land use type issues when we become a city? Only if we employ them. Will we be paying the same money to Gwinnett County? There's something called an SDS, a Service Delivery Strategy. It's a negotiation between all the cities individually and the county for duplication of services. We'll be part of that as well. The odds are we will have some kind of a service agreement as to number of officers on in the area probably and the types of service. We'll also address that issue. We won't be paying twice. Does that help?
In other words, if we're doing planning and zoning and they're doing it, they won't charge us for that.
Yet you're still going to be following the master plan, as you said earlier, with that master plan. And you're going to be going down from there. You may change it from another master plan to do it locally, but you're still taking something from the county, and you're going to incorporate that in this area. And you're still going to use some of the county's decisions. They're ordinances countywide.
Those ordinances only apply
They only
to
apply to
unincorporated Gwinnett. Only unincorporated area will be incorporated in the city. They don't apply to Norcross. They don't apply to Duluth. They won't apply to Peachtree Corners.
In most counties, those counties do apply along with the city requirements.
That will be the choice of the city council. This is an independent entity that does not duplicate the county at all.
The state constitution and the law in Georgia, based on that constitution, provides for what's called home rule. Counties have home rule over the unincorporated area. Cities have home rule over the incorporated areas. What that means is the city controls all of the property within the city. The county can't do that. Now, what might be leading to some of the confusion is, if you look at all the new cities, including Johns Creek, Milton, Sandy Springs, and Dunwoody, once you vote and decide to become a city and you elect your city council, it's a compressed time frame. So what those city councils have done is they've taken the county code of ordinances and adopted it as the city code of ordinances on day one, maybe with a few modifications. But the county code the county really is no longer relevant. Now it's the city code. But for most of the new cities, that's been the starting point. Then over the period of the next year or two, they will modify, the city council will vote to make modifications to the code, to those ordinances. They'll do their own land use planning. They'll have their own planning commission, a group of citizens that will be appointed by the city council to do that. Their own board of zoning appeals. But qualitatively, here's the biggest difference. Being from DeKalb County, we had one district commissioner that represented 150,000 people, similar to what Lynette is now doing. That person lived 20 miles away from where I live in Dunwoody. Today, and it would take me, even when I was a state senator, it would take me 2 or 3 days to get a hold of her. Great commissioner. But today, I can go to a city council meeting like I did last night. It took me 5 minutes to get there. When I look at the 7 individuals, I see 3 individuals who go to church with me. I see the mayor and 2 other individuals who live in the neighborhood right next to me, and I ride my bicycle by their house. Our children all go to the same pool. These are your neighbors now making decisions for you and with you about the direction of your community. The feeling that you have with that and the things that you can do with that and the access and input and so on is so much higher than what you have today. Even though Gwinnett is a great county, it's still a very large county. And your commissioners are spread very thin over very large districts. And that's the thing that I really enjoy about being in a new city of Dunwoody is I could get my cell phone right now and call the mayor. I've got his cell phone number, I've got his home number. His daughter is best friends with my daughter. You know, those sorts of things make a difference.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You said the commissioners were going to make $8,000 a year. How much is the mayor going to make?
9,000.
And for what period of time?
It's a 4-year term. Those are good questions.
4-year term for each of those things? And so
The first one, there are going to be 6 city councilmen, and I think right out of the gate, 2 of them are 2-year terms. 3 of them are 2-year terms. The other ones are 4-year terms, and the mayor's a 4-year term, so that in 2 years you turn them over, so that you always have people on the city council who are
Are they
experienced.
going to be the ones that are at large or the ones that are for each district that are going to be 2 years?
I don't remember what the charter says about that.
So one district can have their district and the 3 at larges possibly?
It
Or is
depends.
there any, like the largest
Did everybody
ones
hear?
from anywhere?
Yeah, did everybody hear what she said? That's good. That's a great question. And the answer is yes. That each one of those 3, see the 3 colors? That's one, and there has to be a residency requirement. And then the other 3 can be at large, and the mayor's at large. Now, how did you? The gentleman asked me. I forget which one of you gentlemen was. Well, how did they decide who drew that? The state of Georgia drew that. And each one of those areas has roughly an equivalent population and ethnicity because it was drawn that way because of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We made sure that that's a requirement that we had to make sure, and the state did that for us. So they're pretty much equal, but it depends upon who votes. If you vote, you elect folks. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Okay, good question. Glad you asked that. That's a very good point out. So, yes, sir.
One question for Dan.
Dan.
Dan, I think you said earlier that you were involved in this process when Dunwoody became a city.
Yes.
So the citizens of Dunwoody, now that they've gone through this in their city, what would you say is their number one item they don't like about now being a city? You hear the most complaint about?
I think overall, citizens in Dunwoody are very pleased with the city. Many of the people who oppose, and I don't want to be too big of a cheerleader here, but it really is true. We had 19% of the vote against forming 81%. Many of those 19%ers have come to me and said, we're so glad we've done this. Now our situation is different because we are a full city, but we have much higher levels of service with police and everything for $450 or less per year in taxes. So that gets people's attention. Now, there are things that City Council has done or failed to do that portions of the community are very upset about. Chickens is an example. Somebody mentioned chickens earlier as an example. Because the city, in addition to charging $450 less, the city has run a substantial surplus every year, so they've accumulated about $8 or $10 million in surplus over 3 years, and that's on an $18 million budget. The city has taken that $8 million and bought some property in the Georgetown shopping area that needs to be redeveloped for parks. And just recently, some community leaders have spoken out, just last night at City Council, saying you didn't do the appropriate appraisals first, you didn't go through the proper process. So there are decisions being made that a lot of people disagree with. The switching of the 911 calls from DeKalb County to Chatcom, some people are upset about that. There's a split on City Council and a split in the community. So you are going to have those sort of political differences within the City Council and within the community, because the City Council does tend to reflect the split in the community. And you're going to get some people that are upset about that sort of thing. That's what I'd say.
Those services are not in the street corners.
Yeah,
We don't have any of those.
and there was a lady who wanted to, there was a lady who teaches violin. She wanted to get a permit to do it out of her home. And it took her, I think, 6 months to get a permit through the city. The city apologized to her, but that didn't help her a whole lot because she was trying to use that as making some money. She was unemployed.
And those-
Some examples
Yeah.
of problems.
And those won't apply to us. Yes, sir.
One more question while you're up there, Dan.
Sure.
Now, if this passes, who would benefit from this besides the homeowners?
Who what?
Who would benefit from this besides the homeowners?
The formation of the city,
Besides the homeowners?
the company that you hire to haul your trash,
What about like
your,
government officials, politicians, administrators, do they benefit in any way from this?
I really don't think so, because you are what I call a limited service or city light. If you're only providing 3 services, you do have to hire your inspectors and code enforcement officers and so on. So those individuals will have jobs. In Dunwoody, we rent office space as our city hall, and you might do the same thing here.
Yeah.
So there will be some people who will be financially impacted. And in Dunwoody, I will say to you that in Dunwoody, in the initial form of government, we didn't go with the general contractor model that Sandy Springs, Milton, and Johns Creek did, where you hired CH2M Hill to run your city hall, and then they subcontracted out, because we didn't have the revenues that they had. Sandy Springs has $100 million, Johns Creek, $54 million. We had $18 million. So we eliminated that middle person. We estimated $3 million a year doing that. I lost my train of thought.
But you don't see any political advantage for someone to do this?
I'm trying to think. Trying to think.
It's a way for them to run for the state legislature.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. What you'll find is a natural progression then for those who have aspirations to be in elected office. First step is city council, and then either mayor or state rep or county commissioner or state senator.
Yeah, I'm referring to someone who's in a political position now. Do they benefit from it? I just want to understand if there's someone's got political agenda, someone who's in a position now that they're going to benefit by persuading the homeowners to make this
I don't think so. I honestly don't think so.
I appreciate being candid.
It will cause your state senator and your state rep, Tom, to have more power. And the reason is, if the city of Peachtree Corners wants to change its charter, many of the changes have to be approved by the voters. But also many of the changes have to be approved by the Peachtree Corners General Assembly delegation. You're talking about the Gwinnett County delegation? Well, there will be a Peachtree Corners delegation. That'll be comprised of 2 individuals, Tom Rice and Fran Miller. And so if you want to change the charter, if the city council members want a raise, it's got to go to the General Assembly. I don't think they can give their own raise. Tom and I talked
Well,
about
and the other thing is that normally in the legislature, if the city like Norcross wants to make a change,
yes.
I require that they have all signatures of all, not just a majority, but all signatures of the.
That's exactly right. If you're a state rep or a state senator representing a city, you don't want to do anything affecting that city unless the city council approves it. That's where you cover your butt.
And that's why expanding it to have all the people vote and then presenting that to the state legislature, or the city council approve it, is an additional control. So does that help you, sir? Does that answer your question?
The other thing I'll say to you is, and I don't want to do too much of a sales job, I was in favor of Peachtree Corners being a city 4 years ago. I'll confess to you. I think it's a great thing. A full city. But that got shut down at that time. But, resoundingly, I think. But think about the long term for your community. And by that I mean, if you look at DeKalb County as sort of your predecessor, you might see in the long term where you're headed. You know, DeKalb County at one time had the best schools in the Southeast. We were the center, before my time, so I'm told, of the Republican universe.
You have people here in this room
Yes.
who were part of it, and I can vouch for that. The
Yes.
only reason I came in 1964 to this community was because Jim Cherry was the superintendent, and he had the best school system in the southeast, and that was known all over the country.
Yes. And State Senator Jim Tysinger, who served in the State Senate from 67 to 98, 31 years, is still doing his Saturday morning meetings at the GOP headquarters in the cab every morning for the last, I don't know how many,
10 years.
35 or 40 or 48 years or something. But my point is, one of your advantages is you'll have a charter in place now that if you ever do become dissatisfied with Gwinnett, it's a very easy thing for you to take over other services. And don't discount the potential significance of that. I would say to you, 10 years from now, 15 years, or 20 years, you might want to have your own police department. You might want to have your own parks department. And it'll be much easier to do.
We have begged and everything that we could possibly do the county for a light at Sumac for about 100 years now.
Yes.
And they keep telling us can't be done.
Well,
Will this help us in any way?
We had similar experiences in Dunwoody. There was a lady who argued for a traffic light in front of Austin Elementary School for about 10 years. She's passed away now, unfortunately.
Well, most of us are going to do that.
But as an example, a way a city can make a difference is, I had lunch with Councilman Denny Shortle in Dunwoody. He's former Marine Corps general. He lives in the Austin area, as do I. And one of the parents had called him and said, there's a stretch of sidewalk 75 feet long that's crumbling. My kids are walking to school. It's not very nice. So Denny talked to the city manager that week and said, Warren, I want you to replace that city sidewalk. So that's now in the budget. That's a very different, much quicker response, much easier way to lobby than having to go to Lawrenceville to lobby a group of individuals who are good people, but they don't really know your community as well and can't act as quickly. Yes, ma'am.
The mayor's can make $9,000 a year. What kind of, is that a part-time job? What kind of hours
It's
are
all-
you making that person to work?
It's all part-time.
Like,
It's
is there a
not-
certain
it's
schedule?
not
So
part-time,
if you
really.
wanna- Well, I mean, it doesn't.
I'm just kidding. So I've talked to any mayor and they'll tell you.
Well,
that-
you don't think of them as working part-time. It seems to be a full-time job for a lot of people, so.
I can tell you that in Dunwoody, we got these parks bonds that we're trying to get passed, and I'm involved in that effort. But Sunday morning, Sunday at 1, we had a meeting of the group that's working on a group just like this. And the mayor came, Ken Wright came. He came in his suit because he had spent Sunday morning at a local church on the 9/11 events, speaking as the mayor of Dunwoody. And I can tell you last night he was at a city council meeting until late into the evening. So it's community service is what it is.
So is there a prescribed amount of time you're asking that person to work for that?
Make sure the job gets done.
It's up to the mayor.
It's up to the
It's
voters.
kind of like
whether they
being
really-
the president of UPCCA and trying to help run this campaign. I have 2 full-time jobs, man. Yes, sir.
If you want to do some renovation on your house, do you have to have a permit from the county and city?
Just the city.
Just the city? County's not involved?
Gosh, I'm, yes, sir.
Confused on hours of operation. Then whoever said, well, no, you can call the mayor any time of night, day or night, and they'd be available. You bump into them, whatever. So you're going to tell me now you're going to work certain hours. So which is it? Are you mayor all the time? Or are you just a mayor for certain hours of the day?
I'm not sure I heard that, sir.
It just depends what the person wants to do.
You're
The
the-
mayor wants to not
Yeah.
answer his phone, that's his problem. You just don't reelect him.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is, send me an email. I respond to all my emails right now. Guys, the question you're asking, sir, is begging the question of a person who, we don't even have a city, we don't even have a mayor. The intent is for the mayor to do whatever's right, and that's the only way I can answer that question.
Probably half of your city council and your mayor are going to come out of a group like UPCCA. That's where they're going to come from. Ken Wright, and Dunwoody's former president of Dunwoody Homeowners Association. It's a natural progression for those community-minded people who have been serving for years, are going to want to continue on city council. So you can think of who those people are and think if you want to have a city council made up of those people.
Was there a question?
I actually had a question for you, Mike. I know we've talked about raising taxes, and that has to go through the legislature, but we also talked about the fact that it's possible that just franchise fees alone can cover the city budget. So suppose the city council starts with a 1 mil tax rate. What do they need to do to either lower the tax rate then, or give a refund to, say, the citizens if we're over?
I think the way it actually works is that you first have to find out how much revenue is available and do a budget. And this will all start after we become a city on July 1st of 12. Do a budget, and then you decide what the tax rate will be. So it's up to 1 mil, and you'll decide how much millage rate you need after you determine how much expenses you need.
So
it might not be 1 mil right out of the gate. It could be whatever's the mathematical number that you need. The charter says you can go up to 1 mil for those three services. And as Dan intimated, and I'm glad he was here to answer that question, because the guy told me that franchise fees alone might do it. But the 1 mil was a minimum in case you had a lot of problems in litigation, was what he was specifically talking about. And the folks from Dunwoody he talked about said all first-tier cities get sued a lot. So that's all I can offer. In other words, there's no automatic 1 mil right out of the gate. It's whatever is needed up to 1 mil.
But
Does that make sense?
If the first year revenue comes out higher than anticipated, say, does the city council need to go to the referendum to lower it or anything like that, or do they have the power to lower it just internally?
I think the city council can up to 1 mil without going back to the legislature or the people. And you know what 1 mil is? It's $10 a month on a $300,000 house. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. There was a question. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Well, go ahead. Will we get a list, if the city, the area becomes incorporated, will we get a list of the budget figures as
yes.
income
It's all
and
public
revenue?
record. Yes, ma'am.
Is that an annual type thing, or?
I think the requirements are at least annually, if not, and I know it's audited, at least annually, these numbers will be made available.
And another question that Dan was mentioning, with Dunwoody, when you accumulate excess money, who makes the decision? Is it the citizens that makes the decision, like a piece of property is bought, like within Georgetown? Is that the council that does that?
It would be the city council.
It's the city council. So your citizens are not involved in that?
Well,
They hire the city.
well, you hired the city council. But think about it. The likelihood of running those kind of surpluses on a city of Peachtree Corner and buying land, that's probably not, in terms of, I've probably thought about it more than most folks. I don't see that happening. But that's a good question, because the answer to your question specifically is the city council would make those decisions. But I seriously doubt the city council is going to undertake something like that without getting a whole lot of input. Oh, goodness, yes. Yes, ma'am.
What about the business community? How does this impact?
I'm so glad you asked. My wife was over there a minute ago going, Peachtree Corners Business Association. Don't forget, and thank you. You know, it's kind of like the Peachtree Corners Festival. Just all of a sudden spontaneously happened, and it was so well. There's all of a sudden a lot of business people saying, hey, there's a Peachtree Corners. There's a business association to have here. And that has launched very, very quickly, and it's been very well received. So if you'd like to get involved in that, I will be glad to see you afterwards. So,
will they be taxed at the same rate as residents?
Well, you're
What's the
talking
tax
about
structure
you're talking about the businesses as opposed to the business. Yes, they will be taxed the same way. 1 mil, up to 1 mil. So, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Earlier you mentioned about Sturbridge apartment.
Yes.
I'm curious what would happen, how would all this building from zoning and all that affect the apartments south of Holcomb Bridge?
Well, if they're tax-paying properties, they would pay the property taxes that everybody else would. The specific reference to Sturbridge was something that needed to be redeveloped, and it's, of all the properties in this whole area, that's one of the oldest. It's really older than 40 years old, and it's in disrepair, and the fellow's gone into receivership, and it's falling apart. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I can tell you an experience that Dunwoody has had that might shed some light on that. We have some older apartment complexes on Peachtree Industrial, which is the edge of our city by Dorville. According to our police chief, about 40 to 50% of police calls are just to those 3 apartment complexes. They're very run down. They've been in violation of county code before the formation of the city of Dunwoody for many years. But when the city was formed, the city started cracking down on it and put pressures on the owners to invest the money and try to fix them up. So that's one way that a city could make a difference if you don't think Gwinnett is doing an adequate job. But one difference will be for your city is that your code enforcement officers, if they need to enforce the codes, you'll be using Gwinnett County policemen to help you in that process, and Gwinnett County courts. In Dunwoody, we have our own police force and our own municipal court. And I'm guessing that if there's ever one service that makes sense for you to add, it will be a municipal court.
It's
Actually,
already in there.
it's already in the charter.
It's already in there?
And it will be a part-time, in what we,
Part-time judge.
it'll be a part-time judge. You just rent judges by the hour
Okay.
from Gwinnett. And it's one of those.
Right, Judge.
You know, that's what, I laugh too, because I asked the Gwinnett County Commissioner, how do we do this? And she said, oh, Mike, you just run the judge by the hour. In other words, when there's enough code enforcement issues, you know, that people, okay, you're going to be fined, here's another warning, you're going to be fined, and they, you know, they have to then, to enforce it, they would have a judge come over, and it's a handful, out of all the Peachtree Corners, it's only a handful, so it wouldn't be an extensive judge, it wouldn't be like a giant judge operation, but
Gwinnett County already has part-time magistrate judges that serve and augment the full-time magistrate judges.
Did you hear what Tom said? They already have, Gwinnett County already has part-time magistrates that are used to augment full-time folks for just this kind of situation. There was a question back there.
Does Peachtree Corners have a list of covenants for homeowners?
No. That's not the kind of, when I said ordinances, it's not covenants. It's ordinances that are just like Gwinnett County's.
Okay, so we won't have to dig up our grass, like Bermuda grass, like we find around.
No, sir. No, sir, we won't have to. Yes, sir.
What is the provision for inevitable lawsuits against, say, the city light, Peachtree Corners? Do we gonna, assume you're gonna have a city attorney, or we just have on retainer? And
It's what you don't hire.
you pay for any lawsuit, say a Sturbridge Square type suit or anything like that, would it come back against a ruling against the code? Someone who sues the county, so that would come out of the franchise fees or the city budget?
Yeah, it comes right out of the city budget. And you would have a law firm on retainer who would defend the city.
The only thing I'm thinking of is that in a size, our size, as opposed to a county size, a fairly significant lawsuit could have a significant effect on the whole total revenue and the whole balance of the budget, more so than maybe against a county or a city.
Yeah, and here's the good news. Think of the things we're going to be doing. Planning and zoning, code enforcement, you know, solid waste pickup. Code enforcement, yeah, that's kind of small potatoes, probably not going to get in real trouble over that. Trash hauling, well, Gwinnett County got in big trouble, but look what they did to get in trouble. You know, and if you got planning and zoning, yes, you can get sued by a developer, but that's not going to be, where you have your big legal problems, is what I've been told is the gentleman who carried the guns, a policeman. Because when you've got guys out there with guns, you need supervisors and you need training, and that's where your big risk is, those kinds of issues.
You had to start asking the question, is that Gwinnett County policeman who shot that pistol, is he an agent for the city? Is the city also liable for that, or is he going to sue the county?
No, he works for Gwinnett County. We were buying the service.
But then
Of course, someone can always sue. You can always sue anybody you want to sue, you know. And so the answer is, I'm sure if someone was injured and they were in Peachtree Corners, they would sue everybody. In my company at work, we get sued for people that, yes, you can get sued. This is America, you can sue. I forget where the last hand was. More questions? Okay, you know something, you guys have asked some really good questions tonight, and I want to thank you, because those are the kinds of things that let me know that you're taking it to the next level. When I started, after the governor signed it, the questions were pretty easy back in early May. What's the city? Okay. But now the questions are getting, you know, Jim, I mean, I just see your faces. It's the next level. Those are the kind that we have to think through. And if you have any other questions that you think of as you walk out the door, Mike at PeachtreeCornersYes.com. Go to just Peachtree Corners Yes. You'll find it. Mike at Peachtree Corners Yes. I'll be glad to answer any of your questions. Thank you all for coming out tonight.